know what fascinates me about human psychology? Studies show we make around 35,000 decisions every single day, yet we can get completely paralyzed by the big ones.
That's such an interesting statistic. I wonder how many of those decisions we actually consciously think about versus running on autopilot.
Well, research suggests only about 5% of our daily decisions are made with full conscious awareness, which really puts into perspective why the big choices can feel so overwhelming.
Like when we spend more time choosing a Netflix show than actually watching one.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole concept of courageous decision-making so fascinating. We're not talking about the autopilot choices, but those life-changing decisions that keep us up at night.
You know, I recently read about a study from Cornell University that found people regret inaction far more than action. Like 84% of their biggest regrets were about things they didn't do rather than things they did.
That's such an important point. And it ties perfectly into this idea that waiting for the perfect moment is actually more risky than taking imperfect action.
Could you expand on what you mean by imperfect action?
Well, think about successful entrepreneurs. Studies show that about 70% of them start their businesses while still working their day jobs. They don't wait for perfect conditions. They take what I call strategic incomplete action.
Strategic incomplete action. That's an interesting phrase. How does that work in practice?
So here's a real-world example. I know someone who launched a 6-figure consulting business with just a Google Doc and a LinkedIn profile. No fancy website, no perfect branding, just enough structure to start serving clients.
That reminds me of Reid Hoffman's famous quote about how if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late.
Oh my God, yes. And you know what's fascinating? Research from the Harvard Business Review shows that successful entrepreneurs actually make decisions 40% faster than their less successful counterparts.
Though I imagine there's a fine line between making decisions quickly and making them recklessly.
That's exactly right. And this is where the concept of courageous choice-making becomes so crucial. It's not about blind leaps. It's about what psychologists call informed intuition.
Well, that's interesting. What exactly is informed intuition?
It's this beautiful intersection of experience and instinct. Think of it like a master chef who knows exactly when to flip a pancake without using a timer. They've developed this internal knowing through practice and experience.
So you're saying we need to trust our gut more?
Not exactly. It's more nuanced than that. Research from the Max Planck Institute shows that our gut instincts are most reliable when we have significant experience in a domain. It's about combining our inner knowing with our lived experience.
That makes me think about how often we actually ignore our inner knowing because we're waiting for external validation.
Oh my goodness, yes. And here's what's fascinating about that. Neuroscience research shows that when we consistently override our intuition, we actually weaken our ability to make decisions effectively.
So we're literally training ourselves to become more indecisive?
Exactly. And what's even more interesting is that studies show decision fatigue is a real phenomenon. Our ability to make good choices actually deteriorates the more decisions we face.
That explains why so many successful people wear the same outfit every day.
Right. Like Mark Zuckerberg's grey t-shirt or Steve Jobs' black turtleneck. They're eliminating small decisions to preserve mental energy for the big ones.
Though I imagine most of us aren't dealing with billion-dollar company decisions on a daily basis.
No, but here's what's fascinating. Research shows that the psychological cost of putting off a major life decision can be just as taxing as making multiple small decisions throughout the day.
You know what this reminds me of? The concept of activation energy in chemistry. How sometimes you need that initial push to get the reaction started.
That's such a brilliant analogy. And it perfectly describes what happens when we finally make those courageous choices. There's this initial energy requirement, but once we commit, things often flow more easily than we expected.
Though I imagine the fear doesn't completely go away, does it?
Not at all, and that's actually a good thing. Studies in performance psychology show that a moderate level of anxiety can improve decision-making and performance. It's when we let fear paralyze us that we run into trouble.
So it's not about being fearless, but about being brave enough to act despite the fear.
Exactly. And here's something really powerful. Research from the University of Pennsylvania shows that courage is actually contagious. When we witness others making brave choices, our own courage increases.
That's fascinating. So, by making courageous choices, we're not just changing our own lives.
We're creating ripple effects that influence others. And what's really interesting is that studies show this effect is strongest in our immediate social circle. We're most influenced by the courage of people we know personally.
So, what would you say to someone listening right now who's standing at the edge of a big decision?
Well, the research is pretty clear on this. 76% of people who made significant life changes report feeling more regret about waiting so long than about any mistakes they made along the way. The time we spend in indecision is often more costly than the price of making an imperfect choice.
That's really powerful. And I think it brings us full circle to where we started, about those 35,000 daily decisions.
Indeed, it does. Because ultimately, the most important decision we make is whether to trust ourselves enough to make any decision at all. Everything else flows from there.